Live. Well, thank you. Welcome to the December 4th Water Reclamation Facility Citizens Advisory Committee. Looking here across the dais, we have all members here, so we have a quorum. We'll call this meeting to order. If you could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you, and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we have a pretty large agenda today, so hopefully we can move through some of these earlier items rather quickly. Are there any announcements or presentations by anybody? Seeing none, move on to public comment. Would anyone from the public like to speak on anything not on the agenda? Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Robert Davis. I live in Morro Bay, and I just wanted to repeat to you what you heard last night, that your work is valued by the council, that you are the working edge of the decision-making apparatus in this city, and you do the heavy lifting, sift the details, and make recommendations to council that are taken seriously, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, and we look forward to making recommendations to you now that you'll be on the city council. And I saw, was there a hand back there for public comment, or is it something on the agenda?
Well, but I think that my comments are on the...
We'll get there real quickly then.
Pardon?
They're on the agenda, not the water.
Agenda item.
Yeah, we'll get there in a second.
Okay, no.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent calendar. And this is the approval of the minutes. Any public comment on the minutes or our consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, do we have any comments, or are we ready for a motion?
I do. Just one quick correction. I'd like to make a correction to the minutes, and basically what it would state is Jenny Gorelick asked whether staff received feedback.
Where are you, Jenny?
I'm on item B4 of the minutes. So instead of what's there right now, if it could just be amended to say Jenny Gorelick asked whether staff received feedback from the public regarding the last mass mailing, noting that several residents had stated they had not received information in the mail about previous workshops. She hoped this problem has been resolved. Thank you.
Okay, I move to approve the consent minutes with the correction made by Jenny Garelick.
Okay, we got a second? Second.
I think.
Is that you, Barbara? I didn't hear who the second was. Was it Jenny? Okay, second by Jenny then. Make sure we have this in the minutes. All right, then just a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed, none. So carries unanimously. Move us to our business items, and the first one is B1, a program status update. So I'll turn it over to staff for this item.
Thank you. I know we have a very full meeting today with Facility Master Plan, but I'll just briefly touch on some highlights from this staff report, and I'm glad to respond to any questions you may have. First, in terms of accomplishments and milestones, we developed the draft Facility Master Plan, released it for public review. We've continued work evaluating recycled water alternatives. As part of the Facility Master Plan, we also developed architectural simulations. Those are in the master plan. We evaluated potential water and sewer rate impacts from a range of different recycled water alternatives and from the cost opinions from the Facility Master Plan. And then we conducted the community workshop on November the 14th that many of you attended. We performed field testing to refine some preliminary groundwater modeling of the lower Morro Valley. We began updating an initial conceptual assessment we did on that.
Do you have any results? Do you have any results from that model?
Not yet. The testing, the purpose of the testing was to refine some of the parameters in the model. So the consultant's doing that now. So we'll have enough.
That's Fergo, right?
That's now it's GSI Water. It was Fugro before, but the key staff left and went to GSI Water, so now it's with GSI Water.
Okay, because your Furgo contract's 100% paid, so.
Yes, sir, and they're
So
done.
when are we going to get some results on this test?
We'll be talking about that in conjunction with the master reclamation plan. So you'll see that draft master reclamation plan in the March timeframe, and we'll be planning to provide you an update on hydrogeology before that. So you'll be looking at getting more information from us probably around February in anticipation of that master reclamation plan draft in March.
What's your boundaries for the lower Morro Valley that you're testing on?
We're really looking downstream of the Narrows because that's a good kind of a natural break, if you will, between the upstream part of the aquifer and the downstream part where the city really is the only user.
So you're basically looking west of Highway 1.
Roughly, yeah. A little bit east, but mostly west. We've facilitated execution of the final memo of understanding with the property owner at South Bay Boulevard. So that was finished in October. We completed internal draft outreach materials for salinity control plan and also the ordinance, softener ordinance we had discussed. So we'll be bringing those draft materials back to the Citizens Advisory Committee and Council next year. But we're working through some of those drafts. We met with potential recycled water users from the agricultural community to kind of expand on some of the initial outreach and also assess potential recycled water market from agricultural users. That's just one of one of several potential users or opportunities of recycled water, but we're working to define those numbers. And then we coordinated with the EIR consultant team relative to the recent draft facility master plan release. And the EIR consultant has begun analyzing the facility master plan, is working with us to begin development of potential project alternatives early in that process.
Could I stop you for a second?
Yes, sir.
On the salinity control plan, this is directed toward Rob Livick. What have we done about the Hanson situation of dumping the waste into the sewer? Not Hanson's, but Culligan.
There's still a discharger and a customer of the city. They'll be, once we develop a local ordinance that restricts the salinity, then they'll be regulated under that.
You need a local ordinance. That's a state law that you need an NPDES permit if you're an industrial discharger.
They're not classified as an industrial discharger.
Why not?
I don't have that information right at my fingertips, but they're not classified as industrial discharger.
Okay.
So the next item is the first quarter 2016-2017 budget status report. Not a lot to report there for first quarter because as you all know, we budget for the full fiscal year. Majority of that effort is consultant contracts and some city staff time, but budget's currently below projections for the quarter, and we're on track so far. We don't. This is the same budget report that we had provided to council back at the end of October, so we're bringing it back around. Some things that can change on these, within it, the consultant invoices often take a month or two to come in, and sometimes if there's back and forth with the consultants, then it takes a while to get those invoices reviewed, approved, and into the city system and paid. So sometimes there's a little bit of a lag between the end of quarter and when the consultant invoices come in. But no real changes to report there from what we reported to council at the end of October. We have a summary of the different line items in the budget if folks have any questions on those, and you've seen that before.
Excuse me, but you say here final consultant invoices and charges through September 30th have not been all received or approved by the staff. That's over 2 months, man.
Well,
and there's a lot of water under the bridge in 2 months.
So
and it seems to me and there's back further in this, it shows that you're going to do it by the hour. Now you're going to be charging to the account by the hour, right? Do I have to find that?
What you may be talking about is the city staff costs. You know, each hour they work on the project or have meetings are charged to the contract.
But anyway, I think that's way too long. I think you should have 30 days. I mean, that's what you expect me to pay my water bill. So, you know, I think these bills should be much more timely so that we can have a more accurate update on where we stand on expenditures, especially consultant contracts.
Well, the thing I would say is, first off, all the consultant contracts all have a defined scope, a budget, they have schedules for deliverables, and all those are on track. So we look at those.
Here we go. Back on page 5 of your 16, it says current consultant contracts. It says comments. Work efforts are under budget for fiscal year 16-17. In order to facilitate a more automated reporting process, consultant costs for a given period will be based on the dates work was performed instead of invoice or payment dates. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, can I ask a couple questions on that?
Sure.
On the invoicing, we talked about this over a year ago, and I think I had even provided some very specific, maybe somewhat stringent language to include in those contracts because timely invoice reporting accuracy is very important in the financial world. So, and I think some of the ones I saw you use some of that language. So I would suggest that when we renew any of these contracts, we take a very good look at the language that's in there for invoicing because to Bill's point, we're crossing fiscal years sometimes. It makes it hard not only to close out the books, but also you don't want to be in a position where you're getting invoices in 90 days and then you guys are rushed to approve them. Et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a very important point, and I think it's often overlooked because the vendor will provide their standard language, which will be you must pay the invoice in a short period of time, but it's not two-way. You know, they don't have an obligation unless you specifically amend that language, based on my experience. So that's one comment. Now I have some more questions when you're done. Okay. Okay, so we're on budget now, right, Mike?
Yes.
Okay, so the format and everything is, as we've discussed, I didn't see any changes in the revenues. I was having a hard time with just looking at the report we received last month and then coming up to this, since this is the first quarter of the new year, for instance, something like total project amended budget, typically that would be end of year, the last report where we received at the last meeting, that amended budget plus the projected budget. And some of these numbers didn't quite add up, which concerns me because I know you're not doing I think you said you're not doing an automated feed. So when the numbers are off, it becomes very easy to make mistakes or lose amounts in there. So that's one thing I noted on the amended budget. And in fact, if you look at the amended budget for the last report we were given, and maybe, Mike, this is a part of these invoicing trickling in, but the amended budget for the total project was 3.9, and now it's 6.1. So where does the 2.249 delta come in? And I believe it's in the contract cost, total consultants. So I can send you some more specifics. I apologize. I've been, pretty backloaded here, but that's the one thing that's a big delta there that needs to be addressed. There were a couple others, and they were just off by a couple thousand, but it's still concerning. So I think at a higher level, my question would be, who on the city staff, now that we have, some new finance people and some folks with experience, is somebody besides all of us here and all of you going to be responsible for the total project, the bookings, the budgeting, overseeing it all? Go ahead, Rob.
So Dave has assigned the finance and budget manager, Sandra, to be an intermediary between Mike's team and me for the final approval. So she's, a fourth set of eyes on those documents. So she is set up on Procore, and she's been reviewing, starting this last set of invoices that came in, reviewing those invoices and checking contract amounts versus amount to be paid in the invoice, wage rates.
And she's very experienced from what I...
Yes.
So if I had these kind of questions, like if I could articulate this in an email and say, hey, why is the amended budget on the last year end this figure and now it's this figure, and when I add the new, we're off, she could answer that. Or more importantly, is she delving deep into this, or is she just going to be approving invoices?
She is looking at making sure that the invoice match the wage rate specified, the hours specified, and that they are within the contract.
Okay. So, but truly, that is just invoice verification. That is not the, I think I'm asking an oversight of the entire budget, the project, the reports that are coming out. That kind of thing. That's what I'm asking.
And so we're responsible for that. I'm glad to respond to any questions you have on that. So
another point that a citizen brought up was the Procore system, and that perhaps we're not using it, maybe we to the fullest extent of its capabilities for a budget, accounting, reporting. So maybe you could respond to that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So Procore will do many things. One of the challenges is each of these consultant contracts, all these consultants all have different hourly rates. They all have different ways. Some contracts are time and materials, some are fixed fee. They all have different types of sub-consultants under them and different types of deliverables. So within the Procore software, and we worked with Procore to set this up. They spent a couple of weeks with us when we first started working with them on the program to help us with setting the project up through this preliminary planning phase. And the thing I'll point out is with the planning and the design phase, we're going to use Procore differently than when we switch into construction. Because during the planning and design phase, this software is primarily used for construction. And what happens is you have a series of contractors, each of whom agree on a schedule of values that they charge the city, whether those are unit costs for pipeline or whether it's costs for cubic yards of earthwork or whatever. Those are entered into Procore, and then when they submit their invoices, they can upload that information straight to Procore. Doesn't quite work the same way when we talk about studies. The schedule of values and those types of things, the level of detail we would need to go to manage these relatively small construction consultant contracts did not warrant that level of detail. And the other issue you run into is when you have upwards of a dozen or upwards of 15 consultants, you don't necessarily want all of them in the software entering data on their own. That's the other challenge that we ran into. So the process we came up with, and we worked with Procore specifically on this, is when an invoice is sent to us, we review it, and then we have created contract entries, or what called commitment entries in Procore, for each one of these contracts. So every consultant contract, every invoice is entered and tracked. When the invoices come in, we type the numbers into the right spot in the Procore system. Then we review it and recommend for approval. Then it goes to Sandy in Finance. She reviews it as well. She compares it to we review it from the perspective of, did they deliver what they were supposed to deliver this period? Are they on track? Are they meeting their schedule, their budget, and their deliverable goals? We pass to Finance. Finance now is looking, and we were also looking at the hourly rates, but Finance now has taken over that piece of it. They're checking the hourly rates, looking at the original contract, and looking at it from the perspective of if the project got audited. That's kind of the way that Finance approaches it. Would we be able to defend the expenses? So they do this invoicing. Then after Sandy reviews, it goes to Rob. And so it's this automated system where we have upwards of 3 sets of eyes on this before it goes for payment, before each invoice goes for payment.
Thanks. That's a very good explanation, and I think what I'm looking for, even at a higher level, not related to the Procore, but that answers that question, is are we applying that same 110% oversight on the entire project and the costs?
I can say we definitely are, and I can explain any changes you see between last fiscal year and this fiscal year, if you can kind of point to me what you're asking. One of the these consultant contracts don't end cleanly on the fiscal years, as we've discussed. So some of the differences can be attributed to work efforts that we see coming up for this next year that were identified the last fiscal year, and then also some overlap from last fiscal year into this fiscal year of contracts that weren't quite wrapped up. So, but I'm glad to go through and answer any of those questions you have, and if we could get those in writing, it'd be great.
Okay.
I got a question here.
Sure.
On the Procore, looking at the general ledger transactions from the city, something like $85,000 has been spent on project management software. And I did I'm not familiar with that software. When I used to work, we didn't have that. But I talked to other people that use this similar software, and they're paying like $18,000, maybe $20,000. And I want to know why are we basing it on a $30 million year, 10 project parameter on that Procore? Why is that?
So the way Procore assigns the fee is they assign it based on overall construction cost. You tell them where you think you're going to be at the end of construction, and they assign a fee to it. When we talk about 10 projects, what that really means is 10 separate projects that you can track in Procore. So what we've done is we've set up different elements of the project separately in Procore. So we have the program level preliminary planning and design, and we have that as one project in Procore, a lot of the consultant costs. We have another project that'll be set up for phase 1 water reclamation facility design build. That'll track as a separate project in Procore. It just allows us to allows us to better track the different contractors and consultants, staff time, et cetera, particularly when we get into grant funding and being able to show what grant funds went to which component of the project, and setting that up intelligently and trying not to create so many, quote, projects that it's too hard to track, but kind of creating the optimal number so that we keep the major components of the project separate is going to be really important for us.
Yeah, okay, but that particular software that the city's paying for, a person without a whole bunch of, jumping hoops should be able to push a button and find out how much we spent for, let's say, Mr. Rickenbach, how much we spent on you, how much we spent on you. Now, and the staff time is accordingly. That isn't happening right now. Now, I have a friend of mine who went through this process, okay? So as of 7/16, for instance, Black and Veatch, the city's paid $530,727.69. On Nunley and Associates, $486,000, $397.55. These figures should be available to the public at a push of a button really easy, especially if we're paying $80,000 for a fancy software. Now, you put the WRF on a Petri dish and you slice it up in such a fine aspects and fine little slivers, it's hard to follow. This is one project, okay? This is one project. It has many sub-projects, sub-things, but it's very confusing. So I have this data available for people that want. It's on www.moralbaywrf.info. That's all lowercase, moralbaywrf.info. And you can click on that and you can get it. But this kind of work, being done, this is your job. I look at it, what's happening here, for what I'm seeing, is very similar to what happened in the 80s with the defense programs that we had. these open-ended and, throw enough money at a project and then hopefully we get it right. We need to tighten up these costs and where they're going and the value of what we're getting for that dollar. That's what I see in the financial aspect of it is a big disconnect.
So, I'm not sure how to respond to all that, but the thing I will say is we can generate reports saying what invoices were paid and when. We try to provide to WRF-CAC and councils a summary. It doesn't provide all the levels of detail that we're seeing day to day, but part of the reason we were brought on board was to manage that.
I'm talking about a dollar amount, how much we're spending. Okay, people care about that. That's what they want to know. They want to know how much we're paying for this guy. Okay, it shouldn't be like it's not a melon scratcher, dude. It's like really simple.
Did you see the second page of the budget report? Because it has each contract, each active.
And I want to remind everybody, we have a big agenda today, and these are, drilling down into these issues. We've always gotten the high level reporting, and we've never gotten the drill down, which has been fine with me. So, I appreciate the questions, but I'm hoping we can move on to our other.
Well, we
agenda
agreed
items.
we would articulate them and send them on to.
Sure.
So if Richard has specific questions, I have some.
I'm glad to
send you.
respond to any of those questions that you have.
Okay, great. Anything else before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'll just remind you of what your own words are on Procore on page 5. Procore software is used to manage and track consultant budgets and contracts, store program documents and deliverables, coordinate and record meetings, and track work efforts, which I haven't seen, during the planning permitting phase. We're in the planning permitting stage, and I don't see very many Procore reports coming out.
I would like to point to, page 2 of our report is a Procore report. Page 2 of our budget report is a Procore.
I might add, you end with, annual fee for Procore is $42,205 a year for 5 to 8 years.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments before we, Dale? Yeah?
I just have one quick one. For the public, in order to view this, is there a way to simplify it? Where you just have, this column is fine, and then expenditures, year-to-date, budget, percent spent. Is that something that the public might be able to understand better? Or is that, we can get the detail, but to put out for the public so they don't have a lot of questions. I know I get my reports at the cemetery, they're basic for the public, for my board to understand. And then I have the detail that I go through. Just throwing it out there.
And the thing we can provide any format that council asks us to provide. We can definitely do that. So we're glad to provide whatever you think would be
Dale,
helpful.
we asked for some of this format, so I would say just send it to the finance subcommittee and we'll review it and the group can vote if they think it's more appropriate for the public.
Just to close the loop on something, the groundwater injection that you're looking at is west of the highway and just beyond the Narrows. And so then you would then take that water and pump it up valley for irrigation purposes?
If groundwater injection would be part of an injection and then an extraction program by the city. So what would happen is injection would occur in Morrow Valley, and the city would pump that water out either at existing wells or new wells and then treat it at the water treatment plant.
So then it would go for drinking water?
That's correct.
Okay, that injection would not be for agricultural purposes?
No.
Okay.
Excuse me. The agricultural
Just wanted to clarify that.
options that we're looking at would be direct delivery to agriculture,
Direct
not
delivery. Okay.
injection.
Okay, great. This is a business item, so is there any public comment on the project update, not the other items on the agenda? Seeing none, then this is receive and file, and we'll do exactly that and move on to B2, which is the draft facility master plan presentation. And looking at the time, we have about an hour and a half for these two items, and unless I see any objections, I'm going to try to target an hour for this and half an hour for the rates. Does that seem reasonable? Okay, and before staff starts, I want to remind everyone, this is more big picture guidance to staff and the city council. Ultimately, this goes to the city council. So since we have roughly an hour, try to avoid typos and, nitpicking stuff, but focus on some of the more bigger picture items that maybe they missed or you want to ask some questions on, so we can get through today's items. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to keep our presentation somewhat brief too, because a lot of it is going to cover the same ground as we covered at the workshop in November. The presentation is 90% the same. The differences are now, we want to focus on things we've heard since then. We want to focus on and responding to what we can at this point. We also want to focus on your comments, responding to what we can at this point, though I would suggest a lot of comments you may bring up are really good. It will require a little bit of thought on our part, and we'll fully respond to everything at the council if we can't do it all today. So with that, let me just briefly, mostly for the benefit of the public, but for the board as well, where we're at here. We'd like to talk about an overview of what the facility master plan includes, how we got there, and how it might, how it plays out into the next phases of the project. Let's start with what we've learned here. We know a few things as a result of all this. That we can build a water reclamation facility at the South Bay Boulevard site that does meet the community project goals, and I won't really go back into those, but including producing tertiary treated water, disinfected water, and a variety of other goals that we've all become very familiar with. We also know that the total project, that is to say what we've been referring to commonly as phase 1 and phase 2, which is to say both getting the wastewater treated and then reclaimed, that is possible to do by mid-2021. That would put the recycled water component about 2 years ahead of schedule. We can go into some detail why that makes sense to do that, though there's more upfront cost to do that, but there's long-term benefits of doing that as well. It also appears that groundwater injection and extraction appears feasible. Mike explained we're still going through that technical study, but that does seem to be a big component of where we're headed on the reclamation side of things. As Mike also pointed out, we have been engaging the agricultural community and others to get a feel for where their concerns are. Is that part of the answer? And we did speak specifically, for example, with Dale Guerra from your group, and he might want to provide some feedback there to get a flavor for that kind of input. But all that's going to go into the master reclamation plan, all that discussion, the analysis of the options as well. We also know that the project can provide recycled water for groundwater injection. That the point is to supplement the city's water supply, leading ultimately to city water independence. That's one of the ultimate goals of the entire project here. So some of the advantages of accelerating the recycled water obviously relate to that, but one of the key ones is that it makes us more eligible for gaining grant money. If we frame it as a recycled water project, get that up front toward the beginning, that will make things a little easier there. There will be long-term construction cost savings in trying to combine as much as we can up front. And then ultimately, down the road, the potential reduction of state water use, if we can phase that out down the road, which would also relate to cost savings as well.
Real quick, can I stop you, John?
Okay.
This previous slide you just had up there, water independence, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. How is that going to be achieved with reclaimed water? In other words, reclaimed water is only going to return probably half each day, and after a couple of days, it's without an external source, it's gone. So how do you get water independence with reclaimed water?
Right. Again, we'll get into that discussion here. I'm just sort of framing the whole discussion a bit. Mike will talk a little bit more about that, and so will Matt. Actually, what we've done is pull up a slightly wrong version of the PowerPoint, has some of the same slides, but doesn't include some of the key ones here.
It's not wrong, it's the version for the next step.
Okay, got it. So I'll just get back to where we are.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
We'll cover the other stuff later.
Right, and here, these are a few slides we didn't go through that relate to community goals. We can always come back to those. And some of the project background that led us here. Again, don't want to get there, but to make the point that the facility master plan didn't come out of thin air. Where it's led from, it was a beginning point when Coastal Commission said, no, you've got to go figure something else out. And that was at the beginning of January 2013. We've gone through a lot of different steps and learned a lot of things along the way, analyzing many sites, going through a lot of technical memoranda and such that have led to and are included in the facility master plan right now. It's also worth pointing out here in the recent past, this is really built on the council moving forward at the South Bay Boulevard site in June of this year, and it feeds from that discussion. And where we're at in the big picture on the schedule is from here on out. What we've been doing recently, a lot of technical work through the summer related to biology, cultural resources, geotech survey work. We've begun the EIR process. As Mike points out, an MOU is in place with the property owner. And now here we are at the facility master plan, actually about a month ahead of schedule. We had expected to have this meeting with you a little bit after this and presenting it about now. So that's all good news. Where we're going next, this is important, is the water reclamation plan. A lot of comments we have received so far do relate to reclamation issues. What are you going to do with the water? Do you know where it's going to go? We'll know a lot more over the next couple of months. The EIR is going to be, it's underway right now. It's currently, the EIR preparers are looking pretty closely at what we have in front of us today, but we're also working closely with them on the reclamation aspects so that we'll have a draft EIR out in the summertime and then ultimately a final EIR toward the end of next year. And that's a really key milestone because that allows us to really start qualifying for different funding sources and then moving forward on the contracting and the building and such of the project. So which we're looking at 2018 as the time frame for getting all that going, and then construction beginning in 2019 and having it completed in 2021. So there's your big picture schedule right there. I've gone through these slides already about what we do know now. But one thing I do want to point out here is that we've done some preliminary cost estimating here. Mike, I might actually ask you to go through this a little bit, but on the big picture of it, we have provided some, what we want to do is provide a framework for understanding roughly what this means for the ratepayers. And what we're looking at right now, generally speaking, is a range still of what this might be because we haven't quite figured out exactly all the components that are going to end up being in there, but you do get a feel for this. And Mike, I'd like to have you discuss a little bit about this.
Sure. So one thing I'll point to is we'll have a little more detail on this rate impact in a few minutes. But what we've done is we've taken the estimated cost without recycled water, 114 to 136 million. 136 million includes the contingency. We'll talk about what contingency means in the next staff item. But the estimated total cost with recycled water could vary from over a pretty significant range right now, depending on ultimately what recycled water alternative City Council will select. So the high end of that includes contingency plus the higher costs reuse alternatives. And we have a range of alternatives we're looking at right now that include exchange with ag, includes urban irrigation of just some parks, the Morrow State Park, the golf course, some other those opportunities, and then groundwater injection and extraction. And so those rates represent the estimated total cost effect on the combined water and sewer bill. So if you look at your average monthly rate today is about $114. Approved average 2019-2020 monthly rate is going to be around $150. This has already been approved. The city's already approved this.
Is the cost of state water in or out of there?
That includes cost of state water.
In your fee right there, are you mitigating the cost that, people own that water? So are you including that when you're doing an ag exchange, that those benefits, those financial benefits go back to the citizens of Morro Bay?
That's part of what will be explored in that master reclamation plan. What I'm trying to do is just give a rough range right now, but that will be an important part of that discussion.
Is state water in there or not?
State water's in there. Yes. The estimated average monthly rate with the total wharf project is we're anticipating it'd be another, anywhere from $27 to another $74, $75 a month, depending on what option you might go with. And that's with a range of assumptions right now that we'll get to in more detail. We're going to talk about the rates as part of the next item. So I don't want to necessarily get there now, but I just want to point to this within the framework of the facility master plan and how the facility master plan is a really important part of that.
These rates are if you combine Phase 1 and Phase 2 with the synergy of the same contracts for engineering and construction and site development and all of that. Is that where you get these rates by merging this and getting the synergy of Phase 1 and Phase 2 done in one project?
That's correct. That's assuming you're doing them all at the same time. You're trying to minimize the contracts and squeeze things together.
And so at this point, actually, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Matt Thomas from Black & Veatch. He'll walk through a bit of the facility master plan, but want to remind everybody, we're also trying to keep things short and have as much time for your input. And we do want to talk about some of the public input we have received at the end of our presentation as well. So go ahead, Matt.
Great, thanks. Well, before I begin, I do want to just say on behalf of the Black & Veatch team, we want to thank you for having had the opportunity to work on this with you. And of course, it's still a draft, so we're going to be continuing to work on this as the project evolves. But we know this is a very significant project for the city, and I know our team has had a lot of fun working on this and getting into the details and working with you, and we've appreciated all of your input that was put into this report as well to come up with the current draft. So we appreciate that and wanted to say thank you. So I'll try to go fast, relatively fast, because I do know that you have all seen most, if not all, of this content and have had a chance to review the report. But we did want to spend a few minutes here today to just give an overview of the report and hit a few highlights of it. So the first slide up there here's the site in the context. It's showing where the South Bay Boulevard site is relative to Highway 1 and the city. So everybody, I think, is fully aware of that. A main goal of the master planning effort was to set the stage for providing the highest and best use of the water that comes from the plant. So this pyramid here is suggesting that as you move up that pyramid, those are higher and better uses. Ultimately, groundwater injection to supplement city water supply or ag irrigation are the kinds of goals that or the kinds of uses that the plant it would be desirable for the plant to serve. And again, Mike and John have both reiterated this will all be determined in the master water reclamation plan. So that's where these exact uses will be fully defined here very soon. So the center of the FMP was to come up with a treatment process and a treatment plant layout to deliver water to meet those end use goals. We worked with the city staff and the program staff to identify all the myriad types of wastewater treatment processes and advanced water treatment processes that could possibly be used, and we set out a set of evaluation criteria. This was important because we wanted to make sure that as we evaluated these things that the evaluation aligned with the community goals for the project. So that list on the screen there, those are the evaluation criteria that were used, and they do in fact align with the community goals. I just mentioned we looked at a wide variety, nearly exhaustive list of possible treatment technologies with the goals of making sure or trying to achieve the highest and best uses for the water, make sure that those technologies are proven, that they're cost effective, that they achieve regulatory compliance, that's a given. And we were also selecting processes that are appropriate to plants of this size and scale. Some are more appropriate to larger plants, some are more aligned to plants of this size. So that was part of our goal. And out of that process, you'll remember we had some of our treatment process experts come and present to you quite a few months ago now. about how we went through the technology evaluations, and we arrived at two treatment, what we've called treatment trains or treatment strategies to provide the highest in end uses. So the top one is what we've called the conventional train. That's called a sequencing batch reactor. We can certainly go back and remind you what those technologies and steps are if you want. And then the second one is called a combined secondary and tertiary train, or shorthand we call it MBR, membrane bioreactor process. So both of these processes are able to meet all of the potential end-use goals. And the reason that we have two is to set forth as it goes into design and into design build that there are alternatives that are viable for those builders and designers to be able to evaluate and come up with the best one.
Is there one process better than the other for reclaimed water?
No. Okay. And then I mentioned earlier, again, achieving the highest and best uses of the water, and the highest and best uses are at the top: groundwater injection to supplement city water supply or agricultural irrigation. Both of those uses require advanced treatment to be able to meet the water quality requirements. So a big example of this is in Orange County, called the groundwater replenishment system. That's a very, very large plant, 100 MGD, 100 million gallons per day. It uses these same processes of microfiltration, reverse osmosis, advanced oxidation, and by using those processes after the two I just showed you, you're able to use the water for either potable reuses or agricultural. Now, naturally, so we talked about the plant and the process. Naturally, we need to be able to get the city's wastewater to that plant. So this is a map or a schematic map depicting where the existing wastewater plant is, and the idea of there being a pump station located there nearby, pipelines through the city over to the new South Bay Boulevard site. A number of different alignments for pipelines and configurations for that system were looked at, and ultimately it was decided, or was concluded, I should say, that the pipeline alignment generally following Quintana Road is the best alignment. It's the lowest cost, least environmental impact compared to the other alignments we looked at, more energy efficient because it doesn't have to go up over as high of a high point. Yes.
At the workshop, I had brought up issues with liquefaction, potential points of failure, force main leak detection system. Have you followed up on that yet?
So the answer I gave you then is the same today, which is that the purpose of the master plan is to develop the concept in further detail and to come up with enough detail to be able to generate a cost estimate, generate the site needs assessment, and those things. The kinds of details you mentioned are the things that will be taken care of in the next phase, in pre-design and final design.
No, you got a fatal flaw here. Okay, you're in a liquefaction zone. If you don't get the waste to the plant, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Now, just so you're clear, I have been involved with the Coastal Commission. I was the environmental monitor on a lift station and a force main that was put in Cayuca, 6 miles up the coast. And I notified these consultants 2 years ago that this is an issue that you're going to have to address, especially since you're going right through a drinking water aquifer. Now, I just want to let the people know, $530,727.69. That's how much you guys have made already, and you haven't even addressed a fatal flaw like liquefaction and leak detection of a force main. That's not good value, in my opinion.
I'd also like to point out some of those issues you're talking about are going to be evaluated in the EIR. That's the proper evaluation forum for those issues. And that's why this is a draft facility master plan. The point is, it has to be evaluated before we get to the point of having an approved project that you can actually put contracts out and design and build.
Okay. let's see, where was I? So we were talking about the pipelines now, and this is going to your comments, the pump station siting. So we looked at a number of different sites down and ultimately arrived at the conclusion, which is intuitive, which is that by locating the new pump station near the existing wastewater treatment plant, less piping to be built to connect the existing system to the new pump station. It'll be more efficient. There's less extra facilities to be built. So we looked at a number of sites which are shown on this diagram. There are two that are still in play, which are labeled 1A and 5A. So they're both very close. Those are favorable because they're on sites that the city actually owns, so there's no need to acquire additional land. But it's recognized that the sites are in a floodplain. They're in an area that has liquefaction. There's a number of things that have to be engineered during as the project continues into design. It's known that it's in a floodplain, and the floodplain issues are going to be mitigated. One point to make here is that the Coastal Commission's been contacted, and this has been discussed with them about siting the pump station in this floodplain area. And they're supportive of having it in this location. They understand that this is the sensible, logical place to have it. So all of those topics had to do with the treatment, and then how do you get the wastewater from the existing system to the new treatment plant. The other thing that happens at a wastewater treatment plant is generating solids. So the solid material has to be handled. And we looked at some opportunities to make a beneficial use of it to reduce costs for the project by either creating marketable products by processing materials on site. There are examples in the industry where wastewater plants create fertilizers and other products from the solids material, or to use the biosolid material to generate energy. That's another common use of the solids material. At the end of the day, the analysis showed that it wasn't cost effective to do those things. We just don't have the economies of scale here to do them. So it was determined that the best course of action is just to do what the city does now, which is to send the materials to a regional composting facility. So that means that the city's solids material, biosolids material is still being reused, still being used for beneficial uses, but they're just not going to be processed at your plant. And the way that's done now is at Liberty Composting out in Kern County, they take the material and they turn it into various byproducts that can be used for commercial sale. Okay? Last bit that was important to the the facility master plan was what's this thing going to look like. So a lot of time was spent on that. There were community meetings and workshops to discuss what would suit the project best. And our architect spent some time studying the situation, came up with a preliminary architectural concept of farm or dairy-style buildings to fit the rural landscape, use color palettes similar to the buildings that are along Highway 1 between California Men's Colony and the city. So they're reddish roofs and white or light-colored walls. And then there would be landscape screening along the entrance to help screen the visual view. So out of that, we've developed a few visualizations to help people understand what it might look like. This is looking straight down on the site. So you see Highway 1, South Bay Boulevard. You see the wharf site up there at the top. There's a couple of areas that you'll see when we turn this into looking at it from the side. The upper area are the treatment process facilities, and then the area closer to Highway 1 is where the offices and operations and maintenance facilities would go in this concept. Now, it's important to note that this is, again, like I was saying earlier, this is just a master plan, and this is just a concept. So the idea was to just be able to come up with a site plan that is feasible and works, but it's not necessarily what will actually be there in the future. That'll come out of the final design. So here's a more detailed view of the site. And then I should point out, so this would be when we've talked about there being a phase 1, of the treatment systems. That's what's shown here, and it shows the operations building and maintenance buildings that go with the plant. And then beyond that, there was a community goal to look at adding other facilities to the site, other city functions there. So this would be moving some of those city functions to the site, and we're calling those consolidated maintenance facilities. So that's the built-out parcel there. So that's the two versions of it, looking straight down. And then here's a more, I'll call it, oblique view, looking south back toward the water. You can see the stacks and the rock over there up in the upper right-hand corner. So again, to the right is the process area, the treatment process area. To the left is the operations and maintenance area and the operations building. And you can see the buildings with the architectural style I described to make it look like a dairy or a farm.
Matt, real quick.
Yes.
The slopes behind that courtyard area.
Yes.
Is that a 2-to-1 slope or is it flatter? Slope?
That is a 2-to-1 slope.
It is.
Yeah, it's a cut slope. Okay, so that first view is without the future additional city functions there. There it is with all of them there. Hard for you to see from afar, but everybody at home can see it on their screen. Here's a little more close-up view of the process areas and looking back toward Highway 1. So looking more toward southeast. And then those are views that the typical public won't see. So we wanted to come up with a few views that show you what the public will see, which will typically be from Highway 1. So this is a snapshot looking east from South Bay Boulevard, crosses Highway 1. This is a little bit east of South Bay Boulevard. And then here's another view as we head west on Highway 1. And you can see the plant back in the background with the trees in front of it to help screen the view. Here's another view. There's trees, so you can't see it. And then as you continue head toward the city, we now are near the care center, and you can see it starting to recede into the background. So that concludes my part of the report. I'm going to give the handle back to Mike. Thanks.
So another aspect of the project is the delivery approach. And so we wanted to just talk briefly about this. So the current schedule that we've all been looking at now for a couple of years is really based on design build for the water reclamation facility and then design bid build for the pipelines and lift station. So now that the draft facility master plan is completed, it's a good time to go back and look at that and confirm, do we feel like those are reasonable ways to go? The thing I would point out is really we had no new findings that would conflict with recommendations from the October 2015 workshop, if you remember, that we did with the community to talk about the reuse or the project delivery alternatives. When we say delivery, we mean design and construction. How do you get the project done? So at the delivery alternatives workshop on October 17th, we looked at conventional design bid build. That's the way the city does it now. You have a designer, they design a set of plans go out to bid, contractor bids on them, lowest qualified bid wins, contractor builds it. So second is construction management at risk. As many of you know, that's the route that Cayucas has planned to go with. That's when you bring a contractor on board early during the design process, but your designer is still separate from your contractor. The third option we looked at are various modes of design build. And that's where your designer and your builder together are one team in one contract. And so we looked at best value design build and progressive design build operate, and then design build finance operate. And so we talked about all those. This was over a year ago now, so I'm not expecting folks to remember this. But basically the recommendations.
Hey, Mike,
yes.
real quick, go back to last
Sure.
slide. I know all of those except for progressive design build. How's that actually work?
Sure. So the best value design build is where you go out with a request for proposal and proposers come in and they propose.
No, I know the best
Yeah.
value is the progressive one.
Right, but I think it's important to understand the difference. I was going to kind of talk through for folks in public, because I know you're real familiar with it, but a lot of folks may not be. Best value is you select it based on what you determine to be the best value. Combination of cost, life cycle cost, capital cost, combination of other criteria like aesthetics that might be important to you. There could be other areas, sustainability, that you might put in an evaluation matrix for proposers. Progressive design build, you bring a design builder on board without having all of the cost information or without having a full construction cost as part of their proposal. And progressive design build, you bring in, that design builder comes in during the early planning process, and they assist you with the planning work, and then they come in with a detailed construction cost later down the road. So it's just more of they're involved in the planning phase. You select them more on the qualifications initially, and then you work with them as they develop their guaranteed maximum price later down the road. Sure. So the recommendations we have really are, since schedule and cost are critical, we still see lift station and pipelines should go conventional design bid build. Even though we have a little longer pipelines to get over to South Bay Boulevard, still makes the most sense for those to be detailed design, because we have to negotiate with Caltrans for crossings. We have to negotiate pipeline easements across properties. We have to design around utility conflicts. And that is a faster, that design bid build for the lift station and pipelines is a much faster process than the design and construction together of the water reclamation facility. So it doesn't become critical path. What is critical path is the design and construction of the water reclamation facility. So our recommendation is that we go with, the recommendation we'd had at that workshop was design build. And really it's the only feasible alternative delivery option for the city.
Where did you get that recommendation?
That was back from the October 2015 workshop.
Who recommended that, the city?
We recommended at the end of the workshop.
Oh, has the city council weighed in on this yet?
I haven't weighed in on it yet. We're going to talk about it with them next week. But construction management at risk you can't do, because you're a general law city trying to use it for a water wastewater project. So currently there are legal restrictions with doing that in California, so you'd have to get special legislation passed. It's not an option for you like it would be for like a special district. Design build is will fast track the project for you, because the designer and constructor will work together. They will find opportunities. You'll have them compete for the project. Through that competition process, you'll make sure you get the kind of the quote best value for your dollar. And so we just wanted to bring you back to these and just say we don't see anything that really changes those recommendations from last October.
Well, design build bothers me because you limit your bidders and you don't have any ability to compare your design versus your build. And Cayuca's idea of bringing in a builder early on a contract basis is wise, because they can help the design. There's, a lot of elements of design which are more efficient or more effective by knowing contract criteria and implementation. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But design build does not give you any ability to compare where you are on the project. And if you have the same companies, you're only going to have a few bidders that do that. I don't know whether Black and Veatch would be able to be qualified as a design builder. They can do the design, but I don't know whether they would be a Bechtel where you could come in and do a design build. So you're limiting your bidders, and you're limiting your information from which you're going to get from each team. So I'm a little weary of. I know you want to fast track it, but maybe it's time that you maybe consider that a little more.
Do you have an estimate of the number of companies out there that can provide the design build?
Oh, microphone. Could you use your microphone, please? Sorry.
I have an estimate of the number of companies that could provide the design build. I know I'm thinking that you wouldn't have recommended that if you didn't think that there was a fairly good pool.
There are many teams that can do this. I would say we've been contacted by at least 8 different design build teams who are interested in it. It's a size range that many of these design build teams find attractive because it's a larger project, but it's not a mega project. I would say we know of at least 8 teams who've expressed strong interest in it. Part of your process with design build is a 2-stage process. So you ask for letters of interest first from proposers to see who's going to come to the dance. Then you submit a request for qualifications. You get the qualifications in, you shortlist, then you issue a request for proposal. But I can say we've been contacted by many proposers who are very interested in the project.
Have you been contacted by many for the design bid build of the lift station?
Not yet. But the other piece of that is the design of the lift station and pipelines. That's the type of project that many consultants can do. They don't have to come in with a contractor. So I would say that's an even wider net of folks who would be interested. And you won't typically see those folks show up and express interest till you get a request for proposal out for it, which we're looking at doing first of the year.
Okay, and so what I'd like to do now, we've got about 25 minutes, I would say, overall. Talk a little bit about the feedback we've gotten, and we can address some of it now. We'll plan to address whatever we can at the council. And it falls into a few categories. Just to give you a feel for the magnitude of public feedback, we've gotten 5 letters overall since the workshop. They express some common themes. We want to touch on those and how we might, how they relate to the process. There's a broad category here of issues that relate to the facility master plan and the analysis and how it was done, how things were arrived at, rationale on why phase 1 and phase 2 make sense to come together. That more detail might be needed on the lift station, dealing with storage for excessive storm flow and such. Those are technical issues which I'll let Matt talk about or others or Mike in a moment. But I do want to go over what else we've heard. On the CEQA side of thing, I think there were different issues that were brought up on CEQA that relate on a broad variety of issues. Economic impacts were brought up there. You can look at economic impacts. I think actually the reality is in CEQA, you can look at economic impacts if they relate to physical impacts. That's where you're limited to the discussion of economic impacts. That is to say, blight would be a good example in a typical project. If your project is in a part of town that you don't fix up, what are potential impacts that might come out of that are physical? But again, we'll look at that very closely as appropriate in the CEQA document. There was a discussion or a concern about, is this consistent with the county's local coastal plan? And that's a reasonable thing to think about if it were going to end up being in the county. The concept we have going is that the site would be annexed to the city, so the city's local coastal plan would take precedence in this case and be amended in such a way to make the project consistent. We have an opportunity now because the general plan and local coastal plan are being updated in the city. So we're coordinating that effort closely with that effort to make them congruent as we go forward. Then there's questions about greenhouse gas emissions, mostly related to the potential relocation of the corp yard to the site out there. The idea being that if you move city facilities farther from the central part of the city and public employees are out there, would that increase greenhouse gas emissions? And that is a legitimate concern to think about, something we'd want to talk about in the environmental impact report as we go forward. And remember, the only reason we're talking about the corporation yard is because it is a community goal that we need to look at through the facility master plan. And if the council determines that's something that ultimately is appropriate out there, that's a question that we want to leave open for them. But the environmental impact report has to evaluate the impacts of doing that potentially.
Hold it right there on the greenhouse gas issue. Have you considered the fact that putting that lift station there with those pumps, I'm getting a round figure of about that amount of energy to pump all that sewage to where we're locating is going to be about 5 times as much as what we currently use at the wastewater treatment plant. So is that going to be factored in as well?
Well, again, the environmental impact report will have to evaluate energy use. That's part of determining greenhouse gas emissions and consistency with climate action plans and such. So those are all issues that we're just starting to be able to evaluate right now. It's a good point, though. There were several financial related issues related to pumping costs, also related to interest rates and assumptions made in how rates are being projected in the future. Mike might be able to talk about that in a bit. There were issues related to reclamation. There were some questions about, well, when and where is water going to be injected? Is it going to be injected at all? What are we doing with reclamation? The very short answer to that is, well, we're working on that. That's part of the Master Water Reclamation Plan. And again, to remind folks, we're looking at roughly a March 2017 date of having that draft plan available, but the EIR is going to have to evaluate all the aspects of that as well. And then there were questions about the courtyard, whether it should be there or not. There are those folks who say we don't want it there. There are those folks who say it's the perfect place. So that's the kind of feedback we're getting right now so far. So that's a rough overview of the feedback we've gotten so far, and we certainly would like to answer any other questions specific to these or anything else that you might have to bring up right now.
Just one quick one on, it goes back to the greenhouse emissions. And in reading the report, and this goes to Matt, you talk about decarbonation towers, and I'm not familiar with those for raising, I think it's raising the pH or lowering the acidity of the water. How do they get rid of the CO2 gas they're stripping off?
You know, I'm going to have to apologize that I don't know the answer to that. Our process engineers, that's a system that I'm just not familiar with. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
But we'd be happy to follow up on that. And
No, I just wondered. I've never dealt with decarbonation towers. Maybe you have.
Well, maybe that makes two of us then, I guess. So we can get an answer for that.
Depending on the technology you use, some of that you release it. So it's basically released in a stripping operation. So that CO2 comes out of the water.
Well, that's why I was wondering, because I always thought the greenhouse emissions is CO2 into the atmosphere. So I don't know. That's
but the level of CO2 that you're talking about is a relatively minor level of CO2 coming out of the water.
Okay.
So it's not comparable to smokestacks or anything of that nature. It's
it was only my ignorance.
Very low quantities.
Not knowing the decarbonation.
But it would be included in the analysis, and it could have an impact on what the final process selection is.
That's correct.
I'm going to jump track. Has the city awarded the contract for who's going to do the water reclamation plan?
That's part of the scope of Nunley and Associates. They're preparing that right now.
So Nunley's going to do it?
Yes.
Okay.
So was that the conclusion of your presentation?
And yes, that concludes our presentation.
Okay.
Leave it back to the board, and we're here to take notes from you.
Okay, thank you. Well, first I'm going to open up the public comment because I know we have people eager to speak on this. So if you have comments on the facility master plan, the presentation, questions or comments, please come forward, state your name clearly, and you'll have 3 minutes to do so.
Is that about right, or okay? Good afternoon. My name is John Mino. I'm a cattle rancher and the closest neighbor to the proposed South Bay Boulevard facility. Although I am certainly not in favor of this location, I have been most concerned about the additional uses not related to the water reclamation facility itself that are being proposed for the site. Reading Chapter 7 in the draft facility master plan did not alleviate my concerns. Chapter 7 illustrates that this location is being envisioned just as much as a public works facility as it is a water reclamation facility. Buildings are being designed and future space is being set aside to accommodate public works activities. If the city truly has a need for brand new offices and buildings for its public works department, that is a discussion that should occur separately from this project. An evaluation option should be in place to see what the cost of a minimal design would be to meet the needs necessary for the operation and maintenance of the water reclamation facility by itself. This should be done even if the other proposed uses were allowed at this chosen location. The fact that the bulk of the public works uses outlined in Chapter 7 are not allowed is even more problematic. This has sort of been referred to already, but I've got it here, so I'm going to hit it again. I would refer you to Table O of allowable uses in the Land Use Element Local Coastal Plan. Public works offices, corporation yards, trolley storage are not allowed on agriculturally zoned land. Some uses, such as community wastewater treatment plants, are allowed with certain conditions under Public Utilities Facilities Definition J5. The last sentence in that definition further clarifies, and I'm quoting here, these uses do not include those uses that are not directly and immediately used for the production, generation, storage, or transmission of water, wastewater, or electrical power, such as office or customer service centers, those are classified as offices, or equipment and material storage yards classified in storage yards and sales lots. The city doesn't need to change the zoning to put a water reclamation facility there. It's these other uses that the change would have to be put in place for. The city should focus its efforts on a least cost, minimum footprint design necessary to accomplish the goals of a water reclamation facility, which initially was where this all started. By doing so, it will not only give the ratepayers a clear picture of the project's cost, but also do the best it can to protect the viewshed, surrounding agriculture, and sensitive resources. Other non-related public works offices and facilities should be centrally located on appropriately zoned land within the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, everyone. My name is Melinda Elster. I'm a longtime resident of Morro Bay, and I do want to thank you all for all your work as a Citizens Advisory Committee. It's a really complex project, and you've worked long and diligently to help us all make a good decision, and I do appreciate all your work. I came to say I really like the idea of having a reclaimed water facility. I think it's a fantastic improvement over what we're currently doing, and I would love to see us not import water. So I have no issues with the concept. My concern right now is with the draft master plan at the site on the TRW property. And I share with John the concerns about these additional uses that are being proposed in Phase 2. In Section 7.1, there's 6 different ones. One of them, which is putting hazardous material containment and handling out there, right next to a sensitive water system or shed, is really not a good use of a piece of property like that. This is agricultural land, and you have a lot of sensitive areas immediately downstream from it, so I don't support anything like that. I also don't support moving several of the city's offices like Public Works and Recreation and Parks. It doesn't make any sense to me to move them out of the city because of the additional greenhouse gas emissions that would generate. Not only are the employees going to have to drive out there, anybody from the public is going to have to drive out there because it's not accessible by any public transit. You can't even really safely ride your bike out there. So I would really encourage you all to remove that phase from the draft master plan so that it could not be part of the future of this water treatment facility. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, seeing then just a comment on, or a question to staff on that. Those uses and greenhouse gases that was mentioned a couple of times, those will all be evaluated as well for any sort of park or public works facilities that would be proposed out there, and it would be identified if they were going to be, because my understanding is they wouldn't be available by the public. It's more of like storage and training facilities for staff. There's no public access for those sort of uses.
Right, and just to clarify, we're not really looking at a park per se, but public facilities of some kind. Yeah, the EIR will have to evaluate the greenhouse gas emissions, and for that matter, other potential impacts of that. to allow an understanding of the big picture that relate, again, to the community goals that were established at the beginning. So yes, we'll be looking at that.
Right. Well, what I meant was parks may store a mower out there. They're not going to have their reservation office out there.
Right, exactly. We'll look at, we'll refine that, but your concept is correct.
And that will be drilled down in detail in the explored in the EIR, what uses are proposed and those impacts.
Correct. We'll have to make some assumptions, obviously, but yes.
Okay. So 10 minutes roughly, and again, we're not taking action on this today. This is a provide feedback. So what I'd like to do is start with Dale and go down, and if we have any comments for staff or the city council, I'm sure they'll be watching this. Some of them are here. Provide that feedback. We can just go down the row and then move on to the next agenda item.
All right. Thank you, John. And Matt, thank you so much. This is a really good report. The workshop you had back in November helped preface us into this, so that was valuable. My comments are going to be on the Section 7 and 8, which is your layout, your site layout, and your lift station and piping. Since this is the first time we've seen these, one of the things you speak of real quickly on page 7-8 about drainage. I was talking to Jenny last night about some of the drainage that may be coming off this site may have to be collected and treated. Is that something that we're looking in the future that we may have to do? I don't know if the EIR will pick that up, but it may be a regulation that we have to collect that water and then put it in the plant itself and treat it, I guess. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah, that's true. And in the site planning, I guess we didn't say it explicitly, but we did develop the site planning with a mindset of allowing areas or providing areas to be able to accommodate that feature.
The other thing is I had a concern on the same page, or 7-8. They show a road section going in. It's a pretty wide city street section, and it really isn't going to be used as a public road. I mean, the street I live on is only 18 feet wide, and so it seems a little grandiose, and it even includes parking. I can't imagine why we'd want to park on that road, since it's just going into a sewer plant. So it seemed excessive, and that, again, to the cost that you talked about at the workshop, that's certainly a big expense. On the interior roads, you could probably narrow those down to 18 feet, like my street, save some costs there. But the layout, to me, in my opinion, it really only needs to be what we need to do to treat the water and to have a reclamation site. To add all those other things is just going to, if we learned anything from the Rancho Colina thing, is that, that's going to jeopardize this site. I'd hate to see that happen. One of the things I saw in trying to combine features to make it minimized is that where the headworks, the equalization basin and the sequencing back reactor basins are, is it possible they could be utilized for, say, like parking, or put another building on top of to kind of eliminate parking elsewhere and then combine it on top of those features? Seems to me that would be a way to, again, minimize the footprint. One of the things I didn't find in your report, but I can just imagine there'll be lighting of the premises, nighttime lighting, and the bigger you make it, obviously, the more lights there'll be. So again, if we can keep the lighting issue, and I'm sure that'll be addressed in the EIR for what it'll do, because there's no lights out there right now. The concern I do have on the layout is that on the one figure 7-4, you show the parcel, the 27.6 acre parcels, but you don't show how the site, the facility footprint fits within that 27.6 acres. So it's just a small portion of the piece you're taking, which seems excessive. I have no idea why you need so much land. You talked about a lollipop design. You didn't want to do that, but this is much bigger than that. It seems like that area of take can be reduced considerably. Also, when you were talking a little bit about taking the water and injecting it back into Morro Valley to take out of the wells, and then it would have to go through RO treatment. But we talked at one time at the plant itself, there'd be RO treatment. Are we going to be treating it twice with reverse osmosis to utilize? Am I missing something here?
You would be for the current, you would be. That's your nitrate removal process at your treatment plant now.
Okay. Seems kind of redundant. Also, on the pipelines, you spoke that you would like to go up the city streets. Believe me, from my experience, that would be an absolute nightmare. It can't be less expensive. You got to replace the pavement now. You got to haul off the excess excavated material from the trenches. You got 3 very large diameter pipes. The traffic control is going to be expensive, and the inconvenience to the public is it's going to be a nightmare out there. So if you went cross country, believe me, the reason the Nascimento Pipeline project doesn't go down Nascimento Lake Drive today is because I worked to get it going across Camp Roberts. Believe me, the production rate goes up, and the impacts are reduced considerably. Also, where you showed, I think it's lift station 1A, down by where the existing plant is it possible that you can keep the headworks in place and take that right into your lift station and at least eliminate some of the stuff in the stream of flow and pump more just pure effluent to the plant? It seems like you would need grinders and whatever to handle that if you don't at that lift station. So it's just a consideration, and maybe we can combine things there or use what's already there. And then I think I've asked Mike this before, but there's an existing force main that runs down Quintana coming up from our lift station number 3. I know it's small, but if it can be utilized in any way in low flows or emergency flows, it'd just be an empty pipe once it goes another direction. And then also on proposed lift stations 2 and 5, they're between the First Public Road and the ocean, so I don't know if the Coastal Act policies will steer us away from those 2 locations. So it's something, again, that maybe John would consider, but those are my comments. I wanted to get through it quick. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Real quick, I'm looking at the site plan. Actually, Paul asked a few questions I had. And I hate to say the courtyard just looks like in this site plan, the 500-pound gorilla in the room for me. You're cutting an 80-foot vertical slope to force this into a hillside. The rest of the plan appears to be in more flatter areas of the site, except for that courtyard itself. And then I see the road itself running with a retaining wall all along the easterly edge of it. And Paul brought up maybe narrowing the width. It's hard to tell this town. They're driving on roads with potholes, and you're going in with a road the size of Quintana or Harbor Boulevard. They are. The curb to curb, that's the size this road is purported for. And I'm not commenting. To me, this is a very cogent report. I think it was well done. I think you did as you were told. The thing I'm seeing is there's a lot of wish lists in this town. And when they decided to move to Morro Valley out to South Bay Boulevard, you moved it basically 3 times the distance it was before. Naturally, the costs do go up. And I could live at peace with it being down at South Bay Boulevard, but I'm going to look at the ways to try and make this thing as cheap as humanly possible. And I think the city council has to look that, gee, they have all these grand goals of solar farming and all these other things. I think you need to scale this thing back to the one thing we have to physically pull off the Embarcadero, and that's the wastewater treatment plant. And so this is more talking to city council than it is to you, Matt. And I think they have to bring back they got to get realistic with what they can afford in this town, because you cannot capitalize this with a town of maybe 400 homes, or 4,000 homes, I'm sorry, and try to capitalize 150, and I think it's going to be closer to 200 million by the time you're done with this thing, with everything put on in order to try and even reach water reclamation. That's it for me.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, I'll echo that. And I will also echo the 2 public comments. And I think that we need in this plan very, very significantly is a minimum bare bones water reclamation facility with water reclamation in it, period, without all of these bells and whistles. And I'll say this about the bells and whistles. I don't think it's appropriate to throw it into the budget cost of this project at all. You got to separate those costs. And if you're going to have public works and other ideas of site development, these should come out of the general fund. These shouldn't come out of the project costs at all. So the widening of the road, the site development, the public works facilities, all of that, segregate it out. Take it out of that project costs altogether and the estimates. And you should have a bare bones estimate for the project. And that's what you should have. I don't like your contingency at 25%. I think work expands to the resources available, and resources available are time and money. And so if you should bring that contingency down to 10%. 25%, Black and Beach is better than that. Come on, you can do better than 25% at this stage of the game. So I think you should pull that down, and that's going to pull down another more than $10 million. So get rid of that contingency. Come on, stay on top of this project, bring it in under budget, on schedule, and do your best engineering and get it done. And 10% contingency is plenty. I've lived with it, you've lived with it, they can live with it. The next thing is I think you need to address the desal plant. Obviously, you're not going to move it, to me. It doesn't look like it's in the cards, it's not in the facilities plan, and it's been moot on every presentation that I've heard, but it sounds like the plan for the city has been set in stone that the desal plant's not moving. So I think you need to address that in the plan and maybe even give a sentence or two why. And last, I don't think that you've addressed the Chorro Valley injection of effluent at all. All you've done is the Morro Valley. I think that you should compare the two. If you're in there to still evaluating the Morro Valley injection and getting the water out, you should do the same thing for the Chorro Valley. We're in the Chorro Valley, man. So that's it.
Thank you, sir. Valerie.
Just to clarify, Rob, the cost for the corporation and public works is not included in the cost for this project, as we've seen.
That's correct. It only includes the wharf facilities.
But that will come at a later date, and it will cost more money. But
correct.
I just wanted to make sure that we understood that.
And won't be borne by water sewer rates. It'll be borne by general fund or other funding.
That's correct. The general fund portions would be paid.
But you have site development, and you have and you're buying property, and you're building a 4-lane highway into there. All that's designed for public works, not for the facility. Don't kid me. That whole scenario is designed for a grand plan.
But you'll still have large composting trucks going in. Imagine that's one of the bases for
It's a 2-lane road with 8-foot paved shoulders, which would be standard. And that's a good thing to have an 8-foot shoulder in an area like that with the kind of vehicles, the type of work you're going to be doing in there, I think.
Did you have other comments?
Okay, yeah. I want to thank you for the opportunity to review the FMP, and the report represents a lot of hard work and reflects the high quality and technical expertise of Black and Veatch. My comments vary, and for the most part are minor and address technical edits and report consistency from chapter to chapter. I went ahead and I flagged pages for you, and I'll give this to the city and the consultants for consideration. And usually if you see a flag, it means when I was reading along, it was like when the needle starts to skip, maybe look at it a little bit more closely and clean up the writing. The quality of the writing varies between chapters. Some are clear, concise, and jargon-free, while others reflect a more complex writing style with extraneous wording. I recommend that the authors go through the document and adopt a single voice and keep the writing as clear and simple as possible. The recently posted summary of the Morro Bay Water Reclamation Facility Master Plan. I just had an opportunity to read this today. It's excellent. I gave it a gold star. I recommend that the authors of the FMP follow this writing style, which is spare and to the point. I also reviewed the much improved revised executive summary. The original executive summary was rough, and I appreciate the clarity and changes in format provided in the revised executive summary. For the most part, chapters 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10 are well written with minor comments and edits. Chapter 3 reflects a lot of work and technical analysis. However, I think it is difficult to follow all the threads. I recommend a summary at the end of the chapter as found in all other chapters of the report. Chapter 7, the water reclamation and site development. I don't have a problem with combining the water reclamation facility and the city corporation yard on the South Bay Boulevard site. I believe there is a lot to be gained. There is an economy of scale by combining and overlapping functions and activities, and it would provide a number of benefits to city workers. I also support construction of solar at the site. The FMP, however, needs to be totally clear as to what activities and functions will be located at the site. I noticed that in different chapters, as well as in the new executive summary, different information, and was surprised to learn that you were even considering moving the Office of Parks and Recreation out there. And that may not be the wisest use of that property. So I'm just saying, be consistent throughout your chapters. If you're going to write an executive summary, make sure everything says the same thing in all places. The South Bay Boulevard site appears to require a lot of cut and fill, which may be problematic given its proximity to a drainage channel and the permitting process. But that's something that'll be fleshed out in the environmental document. Chapter 8, Collection System Facility. This chapter should be revised to more clearly describe the proposed pipeline alignments, supplemented with better graphics. Figure 9 in the revised executive summary provides a much improved graphic showing the preferred west alignment option. I do have a couple of concerns regarding the proposed preferred alignment. The alignment appears as, if I'm reading the graphic correctly, to cut through the existing plant and city corp yard and then loops up adjacent Lilakaiza Park and Morrow Creek, which is in the vicinity of an archaeological site and would require a creek crossing. The alignment also cuts across the back end of the power plant, which also contains an archaeological site. I also believe there is a culvert near Main Street in Quintana, which is fed by drainage along Quintana. Studies have not been conducted to determine the limits of the archaeological sites in regard to the project footprint, and this should be addressed as quickly as possible. The creek crossing will require studies and permits, and some of those studies may be seasonal and take more than one season to accomplish. Secondly, the west alignment would require excavation along Quintana and the roundabout, which is in the vicinity of 2 car repair shops and 2 gas stations. An initial site assessment for hazardous waste is necessary, including record search of historical maps, sister parcels, and a review of Regional Water Quality Control Board and county health records. Should the ISA prove positive, additional work would be needed, preliminary site assessment, etc. The likely contaminant would be hydrocarbon, which can be dealt with in a straightforward manner, such as stockpile during construction and haul. In addition, contaminants were previously found at the Shell gas station at Highway 41, and the plume was extensive. Therefore, it is recommended that the ISA include the entire length of the west alignment option. This is probably something you're already considering. Chapter 8 was particularly troubling for me in that there are potential utility conflicts, particularly in the vicinity of the roundabouts. Those conflicts can add costly delays to the project, and I would agree with your idea of maybe going on the other side of the road, over the open fields, so just as state waters over there. But anyway, that's what I have, and I'll leave this with you. And thank you for everything.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. And we're running up. Our rate discussion will be a bit shorter.
That's okay. I'll be very brief. I agree with all the other comments, and thank you for the report. Very comprehensive. My concerns probably relate more to the finance and the cost issues and some things that weren't there. But what I noticed is that on several of the justification for the cost increases and the new opportunities, I felt a lot of them were very, iffy or not proven out or not able to be costed out yet. Current future costs of state water could be eliminated. Water demand may be met through, water independence is possible. I also agree very much with what Bill has stated about some of the inflationary and contingency costs built in from a budgeting perspective. That's why I've been emphasizing on how important the budget is. And I think from our group, the citizens' perspective, from 2013, mid-range estimate, 100 million for both phases, and now we're at somewhere between 125 and 168, which is literally almost a 50% increase. That cannot be explained away by 2.5 years of inflation or moving from Righetti's site to a third site. Yes, all of that adds to it, but we have to figure out how we've gotten from 100 million to 150 million, or more importantly, let's scale back and get this down to something, as Bill, my colleague, stated, bare bones. There were two main goals: build a cost-effective new treatment plant and have the highest and best effective use of the water. So we need to focus on, unfortunately, the cost more so than I see it. And I recognize some of that is not available yet, but that's why it's so important we get the financial management more under control in terms of the detail level and how we can communicate these costs. Because the ratepayers are going to pay for all this. And, we have a general plan update going on talking about bringing affordable jobs and affordable housing, and yet the sewer rates are going to, double, including what's already been. That's a significant increase. Tony, that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Jenny.
I'm going to follow your direction, and you said no nitpicks, no editorial comments, just hit the general stuff. So to begin with, I just wanted to thank you for the report. I'm echoing what my colleagues have said, and I specifically agree with Bill and Steve, and actually and Barbara too, regarding the bare bones version. And I'm concerned with the 25% contingency. So I'm looking for a cost-effective project. And with that said, I really had a problem understanding the project costs, and I have lots of questions on how they were derived. And what I've done is I've just typed up my comments, both editorial and the big picture comments, and I've made some suggested edits to the executive summary. And like Valerie, I'm just going to hand this to you, and I won't take up everybody's time right now. I guess one question that I could throw out right now is I was perplexed to see that, I know that this is a what if, but what if we did actually partner with Cayucos? What surprised me was even in a partnership with Cayucos, the plant would be more expensive than if we went alone. And that doesn't seem to make sense to me. I thought that by sharing cost, it would be cheaper. Another comment I had was with regard to the grant funding. I was really happy to see that the grants could reduce the project by 10 to 20%, but I thought that we were only expecting 10%. I think that's what Monica Kestrel had advised. Don't get our hopes up too much. So if you're talking about 20%, I'm just curious about the kind of grants that you anticipate will pursue in addition to the SRF.
Oh. Did I call on you?
To bump it up to the 20%, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll ask Mike to respond to that.
Okay, and
the next item.
We'll kick that over to the next item.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
And then I had a comment just on MBR, and this is going back to an amazing presentation by one of your engineers at Black & Veatch, and I thought that he had recommended MBR for what we had in mind. And I noted from the trip report from the last meeting When my colleagues talked about their visit to the Fillmore and the Santa Paula plants, both of them that have just recently built wastewater treatment plants have used the MBR. So I'm assuming that they did the comparison too. And let's see. Well, the 2-page summary, I did review that, and I was actually heartened because the site planning section did not include anything on the support facility, so I incorrectly assumed that was off the table. I realize that now after listening to the conversations, but personally, I don't think a corporation yard belongs there for many of the reasons that were already explained. And Ms. Elster's comments, I think, she mentioned were you the one that mentioned Section 7, the water reclamation facility site development, where there's a coastal zone land ordinance? It limits the kinds of activities that can go on the site. So I don't know anything about CZLUO, but if that's true, that it's prohibited to build a corporation yard there, I'm wondering why we're even considering it. So what's your response?
Sure. The short response is, well, that's a county regulation, the coastal land use ordinance. If it were in the city, then the city's regulations would apply if it were annexed. So while that is certainly something to consider if this were being processed in the county. If it were processed in the city, it's whatever ends up being in the local coastal plan as coastal commission would approve or not, and that's being updated as we speak.
I thought this was going to be in the county.
It's in the county right now, and there are two ways to go about doing this. One is to process it through the county. We've discussed this before. The option that we're looking at as a primary option is to annex it to the city and process it through the city.
And we don't anticipate any problems?
Our discussions with LAFCO suggest they're supportive of the idea of having it annexed. So then at that point, we have to create regulations and a framework, and the general plan would apply to it. Zoning and other regulations of the city would apply to the site.
Okay. Let's see, just a few more. I had some comments on Chapter 8, that was the collection system facilities. So basically, and I understand that this is just conceptual at this point, but the FMP states that to protect critical equipment from damages, structures, and/or site grading, housing, or supporting said equipment would be set a minimum of 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. And that just is all they said about the mitigation measures, and in my mind, that doesn't seem sufficient. So, and I can't imagine how the California Coastal Commission or even the Morro Bay Estuary Program, would be comfortable with that. So I'm just suggesting that you bolster that. I'd like to see a more thorough discussion. And in addition, I think that all of us would like to know how raw sewage would be prevented from escaping the new wastewater treatment plant during a severe weather event. So with that in mind, I would recommend adding a new section following 8.7.2.2, that's the waste discharge pipeline design, that discusses proposed mitigation measures for the waste discharge pipelines too. And then for Chapter 10, the existing wastewater treatment plant decommissioning, I read the cost estimate, and I'm just curious, has Cayuga CSD been asked to review this section, and do they agree with the preliminary cost estimate? And if so, this should be discussed, I think, in the FMP.
So they were provided that section of the report. I'll ask Rob to corroborate that.
Yes, they were provided that report, but we have not had any meetings with Cayuga CSD to discuss that.
Is there going to be a joint meeting coming up?
Probably after the first of the year. We've had difficulty with them getting a quorum together when we suggest a meeting time.
Okay, and then my last comment was on Chapter 11, preliminary sustainability evaluation. I'd recommend adding an appendix that provides a description of the assumptions for the categories that were rated using the Envision rating system. because without this information, at least for me, it was nearly impossible to evaluate Morro Bay's rating. Okay? So, and the preliminary opinion of probable costs, that's Chapter 11. This goes with what Barbara had mentioned earlier, but she was wondering to what extent is there a QA/QC with the cost spreadsheets? And what I'm wondering is how staff is going to evaluate the spreadsheets that were included in the report. In other words, are there plans to hire an outside auditor to provide a second opinion? Because personally, I'm not an engineer and I'm not trained in cost estimating, so I really couldn't thoroughly review this section that dealt with the cost for the pumps and all the equipment. So is somebody else reviewing this?
So we did review. I mean, Black and Veatch submitted to us. We reviewed the cost opinions, unit costs, all the assumptions, made comments back to them on an initial draft before those were produced.
So you did a line-by-line
That's
review?
correct. Line-by-line
And based on your
review.
best, your engineering judgment, these seem reasonable?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Richard, and this is an important enough topic that we busted our time, so everyone's getting our comments in, but we do have to end at 5.
Or extend.
Or extend, that's always true. Okay, Richard, some comments?
Yeah, I would strongly suggest that we make every effort to bring a California Coastal Commission representative like Yair or somebody here at the next WRF, because I strongly suspect that there's going to be some fatal flaw issues with the collection system design on many fronts. The other aspect is with regards to the appendices, particularly A3 in the appendix, you reference some of your notes, and one of them is the Wallace Group May 2006 Sewer Collection Master Plan. I've mentioned this when I first got on WRF, that I have issues with the capacity. My work product from Cayucas is used in that report, and it's being misused. It's being misinterpreted. So I have a personal issue with that. Secondly, on A2, in the cleat nitrate report, there's a misquote from an American Burgess study that was done for the EPA, and that I take issue with as well, because neither of the two reports deal with the exfiltration issue that is occurring all over the city. I agree with some of the comments that were made as well with regards to the FMP as far as focusing on the water reclamation part. I would also like to see a study if you're re-injecting or potentially re-injecting the water into the Morro Basin aquifer downstream of the Narrows, how that affects, if there's any grants that are available to address the saltwater intrusion that's occurring there. So that might be another opportunity for some funding. That's it for now.
All right, thank you. Dale, did you get skipped over or just no comments? Okay. All right, well, thank you. I would agree with everyone else. This is a great report. I'm excited we're at this milestone. Definitely a significant one for us on the project. My 2 comments, besides everyone else's, regarding the lift stations down by the existing plant, and so this is for staff and Black and Veatch. I didn't see elevations of them, just comments that they would look like the existing ones, and I know a lot of people don't know what those look like, and for the EIR and the coastal permitting process, it would probably be beneficial to have what those elevations would look like, especially since they are significantly different on either side of the road.
And those are actually being prepared as we speak. They just didn't make it into that draft. That was the one thing that didn't make it into the draft. I apologize.
No problem. And then secondly, regardless of your opinion on this, I truly believe, and this is to City Council, we have differing opinions up here clearly regarding the courtyard and other uses. I believe it should be kept in the EIR for evaluation. We're going through a general plan and LCP update. There's definitely a vision for the existing site and what would be used there. The other facilities there are just as old or older than the wastewater treatment plant, and that's going to be discussion at some point. They've fallen apart. What do we do with these, and where do they go? And they may not be allowed to go there and be replaced, just like this project. So keeping them at least studied to know the impacts is a wise decision, and I would recommend keeping them regardless if they're in phase one or not. That'll be determined at a later date, but it would be irresponsible to take them out at this point from further studies. And with that, unless there's anything else, this is just receive, file, and provide those updates. We can move on to the next item. We have about 5-6 minutes, so I don't think we can do it in 5 or 6 minutes. And entertain a motion to go past 5 if we have this building. Sometimes we don't. Do we have the building tonight?
We have a planning commission at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
I make a motion to extend the meeting beyond 5 o'clock.
Okay. Second. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. We'll give do you have who gave those? Okay, thank you. Then all in favor, voice vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay. I will be leaving a little after 5, and handing it over to Bill. But you'll be in good hands with him.
And
so let's start this next item.
And if I may, I just wanted to again say thank you. All those comments were excellent, and I look forward to working with the program staff and the city staff to take a look at all those. And we really appreciate all of your input and the support for our effort. So thank you very much.
Thank you as well. You're welcome. All right, we're on to B3, anticipated rate impacts. Receive and consider item as well. So I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to pick up with a slide that we just looked at in the other presentation. So we talked a little about the anticipated rate impact, and what I want to talk about is how we got there for these assumptions. As many of you stated, there are a number of statements in this presentation, things like will attempt to or could, and that's exactly where we are right now. So part of the master reclamation plan is to work through those details and determine what the action plan really looks like on recycled water. And then part of the effort through the EIR process or towards the end of the certification of the EIR, and really after the EIR is certified in November, that's our opportunity to pursue grants aggressively, because you have to have the CEQA work done to be competitive. Because these are programs that are very competitive. We're competing against many agencies in many cases for water and wastewater and recycled water grants. So that's exactly where we are. But what I want to do is lay out for you what the assumptions are and what we think are realistic expectations for the program. And I also want to walk back through the history, because I think the questions, how did we get from that $100 million to where we are now, is a really important one, and I want to explain that. So first, that is the question, why are we so much higher than those 2013 costs? So the thing I want to point out is the $100 million estimate that you all remember from 2013. That was a mid-range for comparison of sites only. That was the purpose of those cost opinions at the time. And we attempted to put as many caveats out there as we could at the time, that there was a lot we didn't know at that point, but we needed some basis to be able to compare sites to each other. So that was entirely the purpose. So we know that South Bay Boulevard, we expected South Bay Boulevard would be 10 or 15% higher than the Morrow Valley sites. And that's something that we presented to the public this summer. But that's something that we addressed at council meetings at WRF-CAC and that we explored at the time when we moved from Morrow Valley to South Bay Boulevard. 3 years of cost escalation, minor impact, but that results in 8 or 9% increase in real cost. The highest and best water recycling opportunities required higher end treatment processes. And as I don't know if folks recall kind of what went into the original cost estimates in 2013. But what we did is we picked a midpoint of a range of treatment options. Everything ranging from the least expensive options like conventional activated sludge, simple secondary treatment, all the way out through the more advanced sequencing batch reactor process and some of the more expensive processes that we're looking at now. Picked a midpoint of those because we didn't know We didn't know ultimately what would go at these sites, and we knew that would be left for a facility master plan. The ancillary facilities and the work really weren't known or included at that time, and things like the plant decommissioning, the recycled water delivery system. At that time, we stated we had not looked at the recycled water delivery at all. Those costs now have been added into not the facility master plan itself, but into this rate impact analysis that we've put together. So the May 2016 site analysis was the last time we really explored any kind of cost information. So the goal was really, was comparison of sites similar to what we did in 2013. We had we call partial costs at the South Bay Boulevard site. And those costs range from $84 million to $132 million, with a midpoint of $107 million based on the old 2014 and 2013 assumptions to, again, just compare sites. The 2013 siting studies had assumed that wide range of treatment technologies. We brought that forward in 2016 because we weren't done with facility master plan yet. There was no regional recycled water system, no decommissioning of the existing site in that 2016 number. So new information from the facility master plan and some of the ongoing studies is important to consider now in pulling together this more complete program budget. So the South Bay Boulevard site is preferred, and one of the comments from that we received was, does it really have less delays? Our assessment was we had lower risk at South Bay Boulevard site just because we're farther from residents at the end of the day. And we anticipate having more control over the cost and schedule, even if the cost might be higher for that reason. Standalone equalization storage is needed for advanced treatment. And so Black & Veatch went through and did very detailed evaluation of flow data in order to determine for these higher end treatment processes for water reuse, how would that be managed? So adding an equalization basin is something that was recommended that was not anticipated in the siting studies. The decommissioning costs are higher than previous estimates. I believe in the original, in the facility master plan from several years ago, the last iteration, I believe at the existing plant site, I believe the decommissioning costs were in the neighborhood of $1 million. So the estimates Black & Veatch came up with are considerably higher, but also are more detailed. And they really were preparing the site for a wide range of purposes in the future. So it's pulling out a lot of the old pipes and a lot of the old below ground structures and footings and that sort of thing, demoing the buildings, pulling everything out, refilling it back to existing grade so that something can be done with that site. So it's more of a complete kind of decommissioning and site restoration effort. The sequencing batch reactor or the membrane bioreactor, membrane filtration, UV disinfection were determined to be essential. Those are higher end processes, but they're for the highest end reuse goals like groundwater injection. The determination from the facility master plan team is that was the way to go. Groundwater aquifer storage is available in the Morrow Valley. So that's another study that's been going on concurrent with the facility master plan. You're going to see more information from us on this over the next several months. So you'll see you'll see how this came about, and it also is possible to offset state water deliveries with groundwater injection. So based on the preliminary modeling work, there's adequate volume in the Morrow Valley. And there's the ability to receive a majority of the water produced at the water reclamation facility site, which is pretty exciting. So some of the new opportunities, water independence is possible. All water demand could be met through reuse in groundwater, possibly. Current and future costs of state water could be eliminated. Notice we have many coulds in here. So we want to try to manage expectations at this point, but we do want to present that we do have a plan and we do have some areas and a strategy for trying to rein in costs and trying to bring them down and trying to show true cost and true cost benefit to the city. Initial water and wastewater costs will be higher but will be less vulnerable to escalation. So if you implement, the water reclamation facility master plan, and and we implement one of these higher end reuse alternatives like groundwater recharge, that the idea your initial costs would be higher, but that becomes a way more sustainable water portfolio for the city when you look 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. Your ability to control your own costs and control your own direction would be enviable in terms of, as far as your neighbors are concerned, as far as other agencies around the county. You'd be in a unique position. And the water reclamation facility will be well positioned to meet all the project goals. So it would present, we're going to design a water reclamation facility that will meet the highest and best uses of the water. Could look at possibly lowering the water rates themselves, not the overall water and sewer rate, but possibly bringing down some of the water rate through savings on state water. And then you would, in terms of the city goals, you'd be able to produce reclaimed water. The treatment technologies that Black & Veatch has presented are the best available treatment technologies for contaminants of emerging concern, which will be a concern for every community going forward. And then the phase one, and the other item that we're really excited about is phase one and phase two can be built in 5 years. Based on the range of treatment opportunities or range of reuse opportunities, we see this becoming a 5-year program, and that's a big deal. So the wharf cost to customers, what do customers really pay for? And a lot of the discussions we have at Citizens Advisory Committee, and a lot of the things we're concerned about they're falling really several different buckets. First are your hard costs, things like construction and demolition. That's the bulk of the effort. Operation and maintenance, like power, staffing, and chemicals, those are significant ongoing costs. And then you have what are called your soft costs. Those are the things like overhead and administration and some design effort. So total rate impacts, how do we predict those? First, you have to look at what the total project costs are, the hard, the soft, and the operation and maintenance costs. Those all factor into rates. One question is, can the wharf project reduce other community customer utility costs? So a question that we've posed is, can we buy less imported water, and what would that say? What will be the financing costs? So what interest rates and terms can we get? What grants can we pursue? And then could the project design include solar power to reduce ongoing costs? And one thing I would note with solar power is the way you would look at that is you would not look at that as something that you would look at what would be a reasonable payback for solar power. That would be the question. Because you would put that in as an investment, or you could put that in through a power purchase agreement with someone who will come put it in for you and sell you power at a reduced rate. So there are a number of options for solar power that could save the city money, considering you are going to use more power for higher end treatment than you use now at the current plant for secondary and sometimes for secondary treatment.
Can I ask a question? So what level are you going to research solar? Is it just conceptual, and City Council, do you want this, or are you actually going to propose some of those scenarios where it could be someone coming in and providing it at a reduced, there's no out-of-pocket to the city?
Part of what we want to do during the development of the design build procurement documents is work with the city on what should be included in the design build. Because one option could be to include the solar with that, and allow a variety of several different options how that could be delivered. So it could be delivered through the design build, could be delivered separately with just some sort of power purchase agreement and some independent provider. So we're going to explore that during the design phase over the next 6 months to a year. That's something we'll bring back to council specifically.
Does that mean there's going to be a bunch of solar panels out on that property as well as the buildings?
Well, the thought could be, we could have solar panels on the buildings themselves. Could be that would be a great use of those roofs. It could be some solar panels on the back slopes, but that's a decision that we want council to look at.
When are you actually looking to try and implement your new rate structure?
So part of what we'll need to do is we'll need to city will need to perform a rate study or an update of the rates after we get through this master reclamation plan and we get into that April timeframe.
So you're seeing sometime this year, later in
this summer, fall, I think is what we're looking at.
I mean, Public Works Advisory Board did this about less than a year ago, or around a year ago. Right. It was in 2015, and it doubled. And I'm looking at this, and you include the water and sewer together, and that's kind of a misnomer for me when you show the cost, because you're picking an average water rate usage that is on a sliding scale where the sewer costs are a fixed amount for a single-family home or a condo. I'd like to see in the future separate the two, because it honestly tells you what additional you're paying on the sewage side. You're kind of hoping you're going to be able to sell water or reuse this water, and I don't know why. Nothing's ever gone. I don't want to say it doesn't go right, but it always seems to go up in this town. And so I want to be kind of careful to understand what I'm physically paying for sewage versus water, because I assume when you put water into this cost, you may be picking 3 or 4 units a month, and there's people out there that have their landscaping and other things where they're using substantially more. So I'd appreciate probably in the future, because I feel kind of embarrassed trying to raise the rate again 1 year after we did it. You know, that's a hard nut to crack, so to speak, Mike.
Well, you know, and regarding the timing of the last rate increase, I might ask Rob to kind of speak briefly to that.
So with the last rate increase, it served two purposes. We knew we needed to get some funding moving forward for the water reclamation project, and we used the best information that we had for the project costs at that time. The other component was our water rates. They hadn't been touched since 1995-ish time frame, and they fell way below the cost. In fact, probably people remember that we were deficit spending in our water fund about $900,000 that year before we increased water rates. That was the purpose of doing
it was easy to approve this last rate increase for these very reasons. You were undercharging for water in the past, and you were trying to catch up. I can appreciate that. I truly can. It's just when you keep going back to the well year after year, you know, you're going to reach a point where people are, you know, they become inoculated to what's happening, and it just concerns me. It dates back to what we were talking about in that master facility plan. You maybe should be looking at a fixed amount to build this plant and then scale it down as need be in order to meet that budget. And at least that way you could tell the citizens of Morro Bay you're trying to contain their costs. Because right now it feels open-ended to me, it really does. And it's based on a lot of people having a lot of grand plans of a lot of different things.
Exactly.
That's what scares me, it really does, and I had to say it.
The costs are based on the goals that were recommended by the community and adopted by the city council.
I've been there, Rob. I've heard it, and I agree with you. That's what I was telling Matt earlier. He did exactly what he was told to do, and I follow that. But by the same token, there's going to have to become a day of reckoning, because you still have to pay for this thing, and this town doesn't have enough people. And last time I checked, you can't have.
And that's the nice thing with Proposition 218 is you can't get too carried away, because you do have to go to the voters and ask them if they're willing to support the rate structure, and we, like you said, phasing this, we'll know as we get further along in this project and there's actual costs what the community does want and what they don't want, because bells and whistles at the end of the day, when you have to pay for them, you may not want those bells and whistles. So that'll be a good check-in, and the city will be held by the community with that check and balance. One thing I wanted to comment on solar, because this is about rates, but for solar, it wasn't in here. Maybe the FMP could add this as well, but battery storage. And if we are going to do solar, a lot of water and wastewater facilities now are utilizing a combination of solar and battery storage for peak day pricing. So when they are running their pumps and the high electrical usage components of their plants, they can actually shut off, get off the grid, run it off the batteries, and then when that high pricing is over, switch back. And if we're going to go down that route, at least in the FMP, identify where those could be located and how they'd be stored, because I think we would want to do that if we were going with a solar component. And
additionally, I haven't seen it, maybe it's in there, but increase O&M cost for the collection system.
For the new lift station.
And all the
pumping.
associated infrastructure.
Yeah, and so just to point out, the facility master plan does include operation and maintenance costs for the new lift station in the back. So that is in the facility master plan. Thanks. So wharf project contingency, and project contingency is one of those discussion items that comes up a lot. So contingency, we don't look at this as a soft cost, but it's something that you don't dip into it if you don't need it. The way we view clients identifying and managing a contingency is that contingency is not something that is continually pecked away at. It is something that sits off to the side, and you have to have a good reason for dipping into it. And if it's not used, it's not a real cost. It's to help you have the things have budget for the things you don't know yet, because you're at a very preliminary phase on a project.
So perhaps on the contingency, then maybe you put a different approval cycle in there, number one, to use it. And number two, on some of these contracts that will eventually be crafted in the design build, there should be some thought as to what kind of incentive you can put in to start with a fixed price and come down, not start as was stated earlier, not start with a fixed price and figure out how we can use that contingency.
That's a good point. And one of the common tools of contracting for design build is to find shared cost savings opportunities, where if the design builder finds a way to save cost, that gets shared between them and the agency. And so they get a little bit of a reward for that, but not what the full cost would have been to go in and build that item. So that's part of that contracting process.
What incentive do you have to speed up the project? I mean, you get paid by the hour, right? So the longer it goes, the more money you make, right? So what incentive do you have?
So the thing I would one of the things I'm trying to explain to you all today is we can bring this down from an 8-year program to a 5-year program. So the incentive for me is I'm a professional who was responded to a request for proposal that came out for the city looking for a program manager. And I put a scope and a budget together. City council reviewed and approved that scope and budget, and I'm delivering according to that scope and budget, and schedule. So that's the best I can say.
And if I can make a comment on that, maybe this isn't the time to ask that question. We appreciate your response. When that contract was negotiated with you or whoever else was competing, that was the time to put in the terms and conditions and how these things are handled, which is why we're addressing maybe now for future contracts, put in the incentives.
Okay. Understood.
Okay, is that it?
We got a little bit more.
All right.
So I want to run through briefly. So the wharf project components, there's the Phase 1 water reclamation facility, lift station, water reclamation facility for tertiary disinfected wastewater, and the pipeline to the ocean outfall. Phase 2 on-site, that's what Black & Veatch developed for us, in addition to the Phase 1 water reclamation facility. So they've looked at advanced treatment, so reverse osmosis and advanced oxidation, recycled water storage, and recycled water pump station.
And that would be at a level of effluent to where you could inject it in the ground.
That's exactly right. That's correct. And in the third category are Phase 2 offsites. These are the items that were not included in any prior cost opinions when we looked at the different siting costs. So the recycled water distribution system options that we've analyzed include the groundwater injection, exchange with ag, and then urban irrigation. So irrigation of parks, schools, golf course. So the Phase 1 water reclamation facility capital cost opinion. So the Phase 1 wharf construction costs, and I want to give some background where some of these costs came from and what are included in these. So this is the facility master plan without contingencies, $97.1 million. Their contingency, 25% of the construction subtotal is shown. This came from Black & Veatch again, this $22 million. The procurement, 4%, so that includes all the activities that are required to get design builders and all the consultants and contractors and all that sort of thing on board to do some preliminary designs. The project administration and construction management, so this is the quality control, quality assurance, all the way through construction, including field staff, that sort of, those sort of people. Permitting, monitoring, and mitigation, so this is an allowance for permitting costs. These are items that aren't currently included in facility master plan right now that are costs that will affect the program. Demolition of the existing wastewater plant, that $3.3 million. That's roughly 2/3 of the overall cost because the assumption is Cayucas is going to pay their share of that $5 million allowance. And then around $300,000 for the property acquisition is the budget that we've assumed. It's going to be based on the actual appraisal at South Bay Boulevard, but that's the budget we've assumed for now. So that gets us to a Phase 1 wharf capital cost subtotal of $114 million, with the construction contingency of $136 million budget, including contingency for Phase 1. That $114 million for Phase 1 wharf. Phase 2 recycled water facilities. So these are both the on-site and the off-site recycled water facilities for Phase 2. Range from 11 to 26 million. That total capital cost subtotal becomes 126 to 140. The construction contingency, if we hold the same percentages of total construction, go to 25 to 28 million. And that gives us a wide range of 150 to 168 million for the total capital cost. Now these are ranges right now, and you'll see a higher level of detail in Master Reclamation Plan, but we wanted to put some context to what the numbers in Facility Master Plan actually mean toward rates. And again, what this is not, this is based on our interpretation of community goals and what was developed at workshops. And what became the goals for the program. So that's what the numbers represent. So the project O&M costs, which also factor into those rates, 1.3 to 1.6 million a year for the Phase 1 water reclamation facility. Phase 2 recycled water facilities, $500,000 to 0.8, depending on what the option is. So 1.8 to 2.4 million total water reclamation facility O&M costs. That includes staffing, chemicals, power, and your typical ongoing costs to operate and maintain a water reclamation facility. So the other piece of this are water supply costs, because producing a new water supply means you could offset some of those. So what are the assumptions here? So indirect potable reuse could offset state water costs. So state water project costs, $2,000 per acre foot for 2016, 2017. That in the future, the estimate is it could be closer to $2,200 to $2,400 per acre foot based on meetings of the state water project contractors. Moore Valley groundwater costs. So when the city uses Moore Valley groundwater and treats that water, they produce it for $1,000 per acre foot. The city has a 580 acre foot per year allocation to Moore Valley groundwater. Seawater desalination costs are $1,600 per acre foot. The annual cost of state water currently is around $2.4 million. And state water estimated future rate could be in the neighborhood of $2.6 million. And the reason I'm giving this background is to show where these numbers come from when we talk about these rate impacts, just so to explore what the basis of these assumptions are. So how much could we reduce costs? First, if we go with 30-year state revolving fund loan payment, if we go with 2% versus 2.5% financing, which 2.5% was assumed in the rate study, in the original rate study, and we're now looking at, historically it's been around 2% the last, actually back closer to a little less than 1.5% the last several years. And so the assumption is we could be 0.5% lower than that assumption from the last rate study. So that could save around $1.6 million a year in interest. Savings without state water project costs. So if we were injecting water and if we were treating it at Morrow Valley instead of bringing in state water, then that could save $1.5 million a year on the water bills. Grant funding, 10 to 20% is a target. We've only assumed 10% in the numbers you're about to see because we think we feel that's a reasonable goal, but we'd like to shoot for more, of course. The solar power purchase agreement, that could save up to 1/3 of power costs. So you might get power from some solar power provider for 8 cents a kilowatt hour instead of 13 cents a kilowatt hour. So what could that impact be on utility rates? So the current water and sewer rate, and one of the reasons we combined these, and I know that, yeah, they're different rate bases. Residents pay a flat rate for sewer, you pay a rate based on usage, a tiered rate for water. So we took the average sewer rate for single-family residential and the water rate for 5 units a month, just for this. And the reason we put them together is because you're offsetting some of your water rate with some of your sewer, with some of your water reclamation facility, those additional sewer expenses by saving on some state water. So your current water sewer rate is $114.50. That's the estimated average monthly rate combined for this year. Approved rate is $150. With the total water reclamation facility project, could range from 177 total to 224. 177 if we can enact those measures we just talked about on the last page. So if we can eliminate the state water, if we can, and these are ifs, if we can eliminate state water, if we can get 10% grant funding, if we can get 2% financing instead of 2.5% financing, then the future rate increase could be closer to that $27. And if we're at the higher end of all that, it's closer to the 74. Now, one of the things a rate consultant will look at is when do you enact those increases? How does that look? And when does that happen? State revolving loan fund, if you get an SRF loan, you start paying that back a year after construction's complete. So you have some time to ramp up. But this is a fast track project, as you all know. So part of what that rate consultant will look at is when would the rates increase and how much. And there's a lot of back and forth between the rate consultant, council, staff. There'll be public meetings, I'm sure, council study sessions on that. So that's how we arrived at those numbers. I went into more detail today than we did at the community workshop because you all are farther ahead on a lot of these issues than a lot of folks are. But I wanted to go through some more of the weeds here. Next steps are provide input on draft facility master plan. And that's now until December 2016. Meeting today, city council meeting next Tuesday, hopefully get more input, share your comments with council. Draft master reclamation plan, March 2017, looking at the rate study in fall 2017. Draft EIR, August, final EIR next November. So at this point, I'll open for any questions.
Public comment, is there anyone that wants to respond to just the presentation on the rates that you just heard? Anyone out in the public that want to talk about that? No? Okay. Dale?
I noticed that there was in the master plan, facilities master plan, there was a thing for 3 miles of pipeline up 41 for ag. Am I seeing that in there? There was some cost estimate on that?
That's included in that range we just showed.
Right. Now, who is expected to pay for that? The citizens aren't expected to pay for that pipe, are they?
So part of what has to be, part of what we're exploring at the master reclamation plan is what the cost is, how much we can sell that water for. That's some of what you'll see us talking about, and how that would be paid. But there are a few different ways to do that. Could be that somebody who takes the water pays for it. Could be that the city needs to get the pipeline in to deliver it, but that they get reimbursed towards that cost by whoever takes that water. But one of the things that we've tried to say a few times is it's challenging to get full, when you deliver water to customers, recycle water to customers, it is really hard to be in a situation where you can get full reimbursement for all the recycled water costs, because they are making a business decision as to whether they're going to take that water from you unless you are part of some court order where they're forced to take it. And so you've got to look at their business decision, and so do they. And so you've got to market what's the market value of that water. The market value of this water is most likely highest for groundwater injection, because you're looking at what your costs are for your state water versus what your costs are versus what folks can pump out of the ground with, in many cases, with their own riparian rights to that water. So it's all that's a good question, and that's one of the things we explore over the next few months with you.
The cost to get it to agriculture was included in the cost, but those who came on later had to pay for their own. I think that's how they did it in Los Osos. John, you might know. Yeah, but I think I remember reading that in the document.
Yeah, I kind of following on what Steve was saying about the separating the cost, because in my understanding, I've asked this in the past, that phase 2 is pretty much a water fund expense. Phase 1, the sewer plant, is the sewer rates. So, we're seeing that they're combined. It'd be kind of nice to see what is paying for what fund is paying for what feature, just to kind of get the idea what is the magnitude. I think the lion's share of the costs are going to be for the new wastewater treatment plant coming out of the sewer rates. And then some water rate increase will be done to pay for the phase 2 when that happens. So it'd be nice to kind of distinguish those things. The other thing I wanted to bring up, I know that Rob has mentioned this before, that you don't have a separate line item for what's being collected for the for the new RFF plant from the rates. At the end of each day, we have to show probably for the state revolving fund, when we do a financial statement, that there is money set aside at the end of each day in those rate collections to help service the debt service on this project. Somewhere along the line, we're going to have to start quantifying that amount, that it's actually there every day, and it's going into that pot of money, and we can show to state revolving fund this money is being collected specific. It's not being used for fixing a lift station somewhere or repairing a collection sign somewhere. It's just somewhere we have to start showing that money, that pot of money collecting somewhere.
And that does appear in the rate study. They made it based on 100% collection of the debt. How much would go for of the fee? How much would go for the overall project cost? So that's specified per year in the rate study. But I agree with you. Probably in the line item budget that we do for the sewer fund, we should have and we do have it. It's called the accumulation fund. Unfortunately, it's made up of several different components, that accumulation fund is, because there are capital projects that aren't performed, that aren't related to the WRF. They're the collection system, smaller capital projects that also get lumped in there. And I could see us separating that out into 2 separate line items in future budget years.
Yeah, because I'd hate to see that when it really comes down to it, that all of a sudden, gee, we spent all that money, and we really weren't sending any money aside at all for the debt service on this project. That's my only concern. And to help, like Steve was saying, what part's paying for this part, what's part paying for this on my 2 water rates and sewer rates.
And I'll take the blame for combining the water and sewer rates. I thought it was a simpler way to show it, and obviously it elicited more questions than it. But I thought we needed to show both water and sewer because it is a combined water sewer project.
I'd agree with that, Rob. The only thing I was concerned with is the city has the ability to control what their sewer costs will be. If you wind up having to redo with state water, because you're looking at years when you're going to have to renegotiate with state water. When does it come up the next time, 2023? Or?
The next opportunity to talk about the contract really never expires.
Oh, okay.
There's not a term on it.
But they could rework it based on the infrastructure the state water puts into their program. You have no control.
We don't have control over that.
And that's why I like it a little separate, because that's something you're guessing.
The next time we have control.
And the other, you're basing it on their cost estimates, which there's some validity there in being able to tie down what your sewer rates are. That was one of my biggest concerns regarding that, and why I'd like to see it separated. That's it. Thanks.
I was just going to say, the next time we have control over making any adjustments to the amount of water that we're taking for state water is when the local facilities are paid off, when those local facility bonds are retired, which is it's somewhere around 6 or 7 years. I can never remember what the exact date that is.
I thought, or somewhere around there.
At that time, won't the cost for state water go down?
Yeah, right. Give me a break.
In theory, we've also heard that there's a giant project that needs to get built.
The Careerfield Canal has been kicked around for so many years that it probably will never be built in my lifetime, so I wouldn't worry about that one.
Okay, Paul, is that it for you? Steve?
I'm done.
Okay, Val?
I'm done.
Barbara?
Just real quick on the lowering the estimate of the rate, 2.5% to 2%, and I know they've been slightly lower than that. I believe we got a quote from SRF on the Streets Initiative on the Finance Committee a few months ago, and I thought the rates were the 2.3, 2.7. I'll go back and check. So I'd be a little cautious of that, number one, and number two, with maybe a change in the recent election and infrastructure projects, I wouldn't be too quick to think that those rates are going to get lowered if more stuff gets done, nationally, whatever.
I think the quote we got for streets was through iBank, a little bit different financing mechanism than SRF.
Okay.
SRF is half the
in fact, one of them was 3.5%.
GO bond rate.
But your point's right. We won't know that financing rate until we've been approved for the SRF loan.
But as long as you put the bullets on there on the conditions, then they're clear, and you can see what the incremental difference is on each one of those conditions. So you can make it transparent to all where you came up with the rate differences. Jenny? Richard?
Just real quick, I think that we need to be clear that if we reduce the state water dependency, we should also tap AB 32 and get credits for that reduction, not only for water, but also the greenhouse gas credits that it takes to deliver the water here. So that's something that will help the ratepayer bring those rates down. And I'm glad to hear that you're saying the market value is highest for reinjection. If we address the saltwater intrusion issue and then those other issues, that's another area where we could help mitigate the increase in rates.
Okay, that about does it, folks, for this meeting. I'm going to give an opportunity to each member to make any closing comments they want to make.
I think that's it.
How about you?
I got one comment. If people want to get some information on the history of this WWTP and as well as some current pretty up-to-date cost that we've paid. You get on morrowbaywrf.info. It's all lowercase, and I have a lot of information there.
Okay. I want to thank staff. That was a very good presentation that you made. I appreciate the way that you incorporated the comments from the public hearing that you went through in this presentation, and especially Mike's rate presentation was very helpful to me, and I hope it was to all that watched. So with that, I adjourn this meeting to the next meeting, January 3rd, 3 p.m., same time, same place.
Don't run off. I have some certificates to hand out. I'll come up there to hand them out, the folks that weren't able to make it to the recognition event.
That's you, Bob. Okay.
Okay.